Hiring the right person in the right role is half of the work. This is part 2 of a mini series all about hiring for marketing help. If you missed the last episode, I highly recommend starting there since I covered everything you need to think about and prepare before you start the hiring search. Welcome to the Digital Hive podcast, where we talk all things marketing for creative small businesses. In these 3 episodes, I'm sharing my experience and knowledge, but also the experience of 3 guests I've had on the show before. Alison Haynes, pin maker of Alison Haynes Design and host of the How Fitting podcast. Michelle Winterstein, the brand designer and creative director of MKW Creative Co. and podcast host of Kiss My Aesthetic. And Rachel Anderson, interior designer of Aurora Interiors. Just like the last episode, I have a workbook for you to help you get things down on paper throughout this process. You can download it in the show notes. First, you'll need to choose the type of hire you want to make, or at least which options you are open to. You might choose to hire a virtual assistant. This is a little different to an in-person assistant or office manager, since they'll work with you on a contract basis and will be remote. They might not even work the same hours as you, so you'll be delegating slightly differently. Virtual assistants usually don't specialize and will just action general admin tasks for you. This is a great option for people who have a large amount of admin to do or don't want to be bogged down by those tasks, and instead use their time to focus on billable work or to focus on the work only they can do. Or, of course, take some time off. The difference between a VA and someone more specialized is that you may need to be more specific and give them more time to perform tasks, since they'll be figuring some of it out along the way. When you're working with a VA, you might still choose to stick with consistent hours, either being available to you at a certain time or for a set number of hours each week, so you both know how much work to plan for. There are also plenty of contractors who aren't VAs, but who have experience in certain fields of marketing rather than focusing on admin. They might be generalists, or they might focus on one part of marketing. Some will have packages they offer to all of their clients, and others will create a package to match your goals. Others work on an hourly rate. So there's plenty of options out there for you. It might be that you plan to do your own marketing still, but you can foresee other work that could bog you down. The same is true when you want someone like a virtual assistant to schedule content for you, but you'll give them the content and the schedule, and they simply do the admin component of scheduling or live posting. It's also important to note that although customer service or social media commenting may feel like entry-level tasks, when they are done well, they upgrade your marketing. Instead of being a box you check on the service or product delivery portion of the business, they can truly elevate the overall experience. This is why so often it is the marketing team who manage the customer service in a business without a dedicated sales admin. A specialist will be an expert in one part of marketing. They might cost more than a standard contractor, but they're usually worth it, depending on your goals and budget, of course. When you share those basics I talked about in the last episode, your brand and the holistic marketing plan, they can execute within their part of that plan to a higher level. A strategist kind of does what it says on the tin. They might be generalist or super specific to one platform, but working with a strategist helps you to figure out the plan. The way I operate is that I take my clients through a process, and we not only create the strategy, but I also help them to create their execution plan, and we cover the different ways they'll evolve the plan over time based on analytics and feedback they get, so their strategy grows with them instead of being something they outgrow and need to start over. You might choose to hire an employee who might be the beginning of a growing marketing team. Whether they're part-time or full-time and who they report to, this will help you delegate the work, but create a specific role for someone to fit into. One last option that isn't hiring, but is an alternative in some cases, is to DIY it. You could do that by Googling and figuring it out, but that takes a lot of time, so a lot of people might make it simpler for themselves by learning from a course or hiring a coach. Coaching is more tailored to you than a course, so you can decide whether the tasks you're hiring for are something a course could cover, or if you want a more dedicated, personalized approach. I'm primarily a strategist and coach, and one of the biggest things I help clients do is figure it all out and help them take action themselves. I'm not for everyone, that'd be impossible, but when I work with clients who need this exact thing, it's transformative for them. The difference between strategy alone and the coaching is that when we prepare the strategy together, they then take action on their own. With the coaching, we still make the strategy together. We just also have calls to work through evolving it and uncovering those new hurdles together as they take action. People make that decision based mostly on how they like to operate and whether they want someone to act as support or accountability through that period of figuring it out. You can benefit from taking time to pause to consider at this stage what the ramifications of this hire would be on the somewhat negative side. When considering the logistics of the sales process or the delivery of your offer, does more sales equal more customer service chat messages, more orders to pack, or needing to order supplies more often? In some businesses, for every salesperson, you might need 0.25 of a role for management or admin or some other relative but required role. When you use this time to evaluate the knock on effects, you can hire a little differently, possibly choosing to hire for a role where they have expertise in doing their own paperwork and don't expect to have an assistant. In the context of hiring a strategist or coach, who will be the one to take action and how much time do they have to do that? Not everything you do needs to be an ongoing thing. In my experience, hiring someone on a temporary basis can help you to practice the delegation and feedback process without overcommitting yourself. It helps you to get out of your own head, bounce ideas off of another person, and get things off your plate. It can also help with budgeting, and it puts a clear timeline on things. Some tasks or roles need to be done weekly, monthly, quarterly, you get the picture. So those might be a contractor or employee who you can rely on to action them regularly, or possibly own that task or responsibility and improve it over time. Aside from the legal differences, deciding between whether you will outsource or employ is another key decision. When you employ someone, there's more of a cut and dry understanding that their role description and the super specific tasks they work on may differ from the job description slightly because they're mostly general terms in there. That's the beauty of it. In some instances, their position, name, and salary might change and evolve as they take on more responsibility. When you're outsourcing, this depends a lot on your agreement and who you actually hire, and you'll need to often instigate conversations about adding to the work. If you say you'll manage something but then wind up not having time to do it, you'll have to have the discussion to have them price it or agree to an hourly rate to take on that work from you. Outsourcing for a project with a very clear scope means that things are either inside or outside the scope. When something is outside the scope, it can be added, of course, so it's all about how you ask. I find a treat others as you would like to be treated approach works well in business and in life. We'll talk about this more in the next episode, but thinking about how you'd like to operate and have the role grow while choosing who to hire can help limit the options you're willing to hire for and the likelihood of the success of that role as a result of that clarity. If you were hiring an employee and it was your first marketing hire, you'd need to decide between levels of experience that would otherwise be represented by seniority and also how specialized you want them to be. Often your first hire will be a general role since you'll often need them to do a little bit of everything. The level of experience might depend on your budget, but also how much you have time or knowledge to train, delegate, and manage that hire, since you are most likely the person they'll report into. Do you know what you need down to how the task is done, but you need someone to do the minutiae for you? The more junior someone is, the more you'll need to manage them. The more senior or experienced someone is, you might need to up your game in the best way possible. The somewhat hidden benefits of having an experienced marketing person can include better forecasting and the ability to make decisions from those forecasts, gaining feedback and having the options to undertake and accurately analyze A/B testing. They keep you moving forward since their data shows what is losing people, and they can provide better feedback to most, if not all, of your departments because they hear all about it through the process, especially when you consider word of mouth marketing. Granted, you'll need to talk with them about these ahead of time so that the responsibilities are established and those actions get taken. They're not going to just provide them for free without any discussion or it being part of a package. With an employee, they might push for their own growth, but there's a limit to these things as to how much people are going to push without actually getting some gratification from you. To get a better idea of what options you have for what you're specifically looking for, research what's out there. Ask friends for referrals and reach out to your network. Why I say to speak to them is that they didn't wake up one day and magically have 8 staff. They hired them one by one and have learned from their lessons. Ask how they structured their teams and how they started and what they might do differently now in hindsight. Take everything with a grain of salt since their business is not the same as yours and time has passed. Also consider your own past work experience either being managed or managing, as well as your experience in doing these tasks you're now outsourcing, assuming you have already been doing them. In some situations, you might find it helps to plan what might be the next few hires so you can fit in each new person. This might depend on if you see yourself bringing on multiple people in the next year, or if you have a few projects in mind, since planning based on years and years is often too far in the marketing world. If you don't have a referral from a friend, or if you want to evaluate extra options, you might find people in a few different spaces. They might be active in your local or online communities that you have, which means they're likely to have some shared values with you. You might find them on Google by searching for what you're looking for. You might find them on social media through search hashtags or other people commenting on or sharing their content. Depending on the type of hire, you might find directories that service this need or a form of hiring agency or temping company that you can utilize. There's also the classic job listing places if you're bringing on an employee, or a whole other layer of niched where in some areas there are more specific industry or experience based listings, either on the student end or the expert end. You'll also want to think about how you make yourself more visible and desirable for a potential employee. This isn't as important when hiring a contractor, but depending on the job market, you might need to show that potential employee a little more of why they might enjoy working with you. Sometimes this can be as simple as showing a little bit of the behind the scenes, the diversity of work that you're doing, sharing when a team member is being promoted. Now, obviously, if you don't already have employees, this can be a little bit different, but just showing how you kind of work on a day-to-day basis can show that people can be like, okay, I would love to work with that person. I really like their ideas, or I really like this product that they have, or whichever. But just sharing a little bit more of the behind the scenes might be a way to inspire a few people to kind of, as they're going through that gut check of whether they want to work with you ahead of an interview. When you're hiring for marketing, it's really about how much you want to be open about and not overselling it. If you aren't all that active on socials, but that will be their job, be clear about that. It shows you have realistic expectations and an understanding of where you're currently at. Being clear that, like, this is a new role. We have noticed that this task wasn't being prioritized, but it should be a priority for us, and that's why we're making this new hire. It's as simple as that, rather than being like, you will be managing our multinational social media platforms that really you post on once in a blue moon. It's just being realistic so that they understand that you're not going to expect them to do too much in the next wee while, or that you think a little too highly of your marketing when maybe the proof isn't quite there. Depending on the hire and what you offer, this part of the process will look very different, but it's so often something that gets overlooked. This somewhat relates to this person's approach that you're looking to hire. Each person has their own approach to marketing, regardless of whether they're a contractor or employee, so you'll want to make sure it pairs well with what you're looking for. Your approach to marketing will be based on the needs of your potential customer and the values of the business. Some approaches opt for higher investment to get a reasonably consistent return. Others aim for long-term investment through relationship building. There's way more approaches than those two, but they're two quite opposing examples for you to consider. The approach will have a large impact on what marketing efforts you try and how that action plan comes together. For your hire, this will determine how they make decisions and what they adapt the plan towards over time, because every little micro decision isn't going to be something that they run past you. So they need this kind of brief in a way, and this comparative approach, shared approach, agreed approach to base things on, so that when they're making those micro decisions, they're not running every single thing past you. It would just take too long. Basically, it would make the idea of hiring redundant. Rachel shared that it can work wonders to understand what you need so you can ensure you are hiring someone that can fill that most basic need your company has. She pointed out that there are a lot of shiny objects when you're on someone's sales page, so you don't want to get distracted from the reason you went looking for help in the first place. This is when you go back to your checklist of what you want that I talked about in the previous episode. The things that are extra might get noted down somewhere, but the comparisons of your options should be based on the initial checklist. You might find something you hadn't thought about, and you can decide whether it's crucial enough to add to the checklist. Where possible, try not to expand beyond your initial needs and hopes for this hire, only because something sounds fun or suddenly necessary after a pitch. It's basically just not very good for your budget. In plenty of instances, you'll be able to evaluate this person partly based on their work experience or shareable portfolio. In other instances where there's more confidentiality to consider, you can discuss their work and they can point you to some public content for review. This is where the super specific questions come into play. All of the what if questions. They come in handy when you can't see what they can do. Ads is a harder one for this because everything's kind of behind the scenes. There's budgets involved that maybe they're not allowed to share. But if they have testimonials or a reference, that's usually fine. There are other ways to gain proof, even when they can show you their work, but you want to verify they truly did all of that work themselves and not maybe their colleague, but they're passing it off as their own. When preparing for an interview or meeting, I like to keep the list of questions to ask pretty simple. Deciding what you want to know and asking about that is a very straightforward way to tackle it. Sure, you could come up with some tricky cloak and dagger way of asking something. However, the clarity and direct nature of the question tends to relate directly to what answers you'll get. I've included some prompts in the workbook to get you started, but if your list is short, just make notes on things to loop back around to as they're talking about different things and telling you about themselves. One thing I have done in the past is included a mention this in your application kind of a thing. And it weeded out all of the people who didn't read the job description properly because it was kind of hidden in between the actual tasks of the job. Not the piece where it's the waffle about the company and things, but it was actually in the part where they need to tailor their cover letter and their expertise that relates to this job. It was hidden in there, and we still had very few people do it. So basically, you can rule out the people who don't have great attention to detail in that kind of an instance, which is kind of what we were trying to do. And then you follow through with that kind of specificity in the interview to make sure that they're not just really good at reading job descriptions, they are actually, in fact, really good at the specificity for that role. Particularly, you might like someone's work, but want something different to anything they've ever done. That's great. Be friends with them. It's often not such a great idea to hire someone who you can't point to parts of their work and say, this is what I like the most because of XYZ. This can be so clear to us when it's something visual, like a photographer or an illustrator. It's also important with other aspects like copywriting or website layouts. It's best to discuss this since they may have done things based on what the client wanted in those instances that you're referring to with those little adjustments, and that they actually would have done things the way that you want them to do in this instance. It also gives them a chance to explain how they might do that for you and give you a little more information about what would lead those decisions. This might seem a little counterintuitive to what I shared in the previous episode about how I liked Michelle's work because it all looked different. I still liked all the brands she designed and obviously had my favorites, but it's branding. So I needed it to look like my brand, but to that same level of design, execution, and being tailored to the brand it was embodying. Finding the right fit can take a little bit of trial and error, but the more you speak to people, the more you'll understand how they match your needs. Part of that is establishing your expectations. Later, you'll be determining success, so it's only fair to discuss it before you make an agreement. For Rachel, she's only worked with someone who had one signature offer, and then moving forward, they went hourly as needed. That would have meant she made her decision on the right fit based on that one offer instead of the potential options. Plenty of service providers specifically will have a range of packages to choose from, and so when chatting with them about potentially working together, you'll have one extra decision to make, or potentially four. When Alison hired, she chose a package and the amount of work that her hire would do for her based on the podcast schedule and frequency of marketing she wanted. For Michelle, she was hiring for someone to help with billable work. She based her decisions on demand and some trial and error from past projects. Assuming you found a few options when you're comparing their packages, be clear on the differences between the people that you're looking at as well, or maybe their businesses. You also need to consider whether you'll have the ability to change later if it's an ongoing thing or add extra pieces to a project as it evolves. For any additional items that are included on the extended packages that you have options to choose from, you'll want to be clear on what each extra item is and how it relates to your core need for hiring, as well as whether you can pick and choose which of those things you add and which of them you don't actually pay for. Assuming they only give you options that fit into your budget, you can decide based on what you feel is the right investment for right now. This might include how risk-averse you are, whether you need everything that's included, or whether one feels like a good starting point. If you can get everything you need on their lowest priced package, that's great. You'll have room to grow, but you're getting a better return on your investment than if you just got pulled away into their highest package. There are also plenty of situations where part of the cost is fixed, but there are options to scale up or down the rest to better your investment or to reduce it. A great example of this is brand photography, where you're comparing someone who could offer you 3 images for X price versus someone who would provide 50 photos for Y price. The stark contrast here is often from their process and approach and who they usually service. A few shots would be common for a headshot photographer, but a brand photo package can show more angles and shots without your actual face or the product in it, so you have more of a range to use across your website, networking opportunities, and social content. The somewhat fixed cost of hair, makeup, outfits, renting a space for the day might not change. What could change is the time spent with the photographer or added output from them. And because you're comparing two people with very different styles and approaches and essentially output, by spending a little more, you can get a whole lot more. Obviously, you still need to factor whether you need those extras, whatever they may be. Similarly, website hosting might cost the same, so adding that extra page doesn't change that. But some platforms will cost more if you want certain features, like the ability to have a file upload in your form. Sometimes you need to add on a whole new app for this one software to do the thing that you need it to do, and that can cost you $50 a month. It's all just relative to what are you trying to achieve, what are the features that you need, and which option allows you to do that. Some website developers will only work with one platform, so if you don't want to work with WordPress, then you can't work with that person. But also some people offer WordPress, Squarespace, and Shopify. You can just decide as you're going through and talking to different people as to which platform works for you, which designer works for you, what kind of maintenance plan works for you. You have lots of options. It's not just that like, oh, I got this one referral from this one person, so I guess I have to work with that person. There is also the consideration that if you are using a referral from someone, that you need to decide whether you want to do marketing to either like their level or the amount of output that they're doing. For example, if you are taking a reference for a website project and that person blogs and updates their service pages all the time, but you want to either maybe like promote a book or your services and all of the pricing and everything will only be provided to people in a proposal document after a call. You do not plan on blogging. You do not plan on having an email list. Any of those kind of things. It's taking that referral with a grain of salt of like, okay, so this person was great for them. Their package was perfect for them, but maybe this person doesn't offer a package that suits me. So maybe either that person that they referred me to can give me a reference for someone who does something slightly differently, or maybe I'll just continue my research and potentially come back to that person, but do a little bit more research in the time rather than just like jumping on this one referral that I got because I maybe like the website of the person that I know, but don't actually want any of the features of the website. You may like to consider what beyond this project you may need. If the same person who does your website can also manage your email hosting, great. Some web designers expect you to do your own edits after launch, so they don't offer maintenance, while some brand designers also expand into designing extra graphics, apparel, and printing materials. So once they've done your initial brand design, you're not like going off on your own to find each individual person to customize it for that medium. If your brand photographer can have a video person with them who they collaborate with, that could be a great extension. While you might not want to work with someone who claims to know everything, there are the usual extensions where you'd prefer to work with someone who already knows you, your business, and who, quite frankly, you already trust. You still need to spend time reading reports, but would a meeting help you to better understand what's happening versus being emailed a PDF? Don't be afraid to make that clear or something similar, since it could better strengthen your working relationship. Once you bring it up, it's up to them to add it in or not. Sometimes you can think of this investment decision like buying a fridge. There's the cost of it, and then there's the energy rating of how much electricity it uses to run that impacts your ongoing electricity bill. You're balancing out the upfront costs and the ongoing ones to get that long-term investment number. The same sort of goes for investing in a great website with someone who can make content and search ranking optimizations over time versus getting 4 cheap websites or buying countless templates and not quite loving the results. Every option on the market has its place, but deciding which one is right for you right now and for the near future is the part you have control over. So on the other hand, you've got the instances where you are hiring an employee, so you write their job description. In these instances, you can think about it as in like, what experience do I want this person to have? What level of expertise in each of those areas do I need them to have? Do I need them to have 2+ years of experience? Do I need them to have 7+ years of experience? What tasks do I want them to be fully responsible for? Which ones will they be learning? Which parts are new for the business? Which parts have you been doing? Which parts have you previously hired a contractor, but now you're wanting to bring it in-house? Maybe they need to have experience in skills that are kind of newer in marketing, like video work, either making the video themselves or managing a shoot. Maybe you need them to understand social media, but specifically call out TikTok versus Facebook. You also might have more of a professional lens where you specifically say LinkedIn, and maybe you even mention how they would use LinkedIn for you so that it's more specific. And then that way, either they clarify that expertise in their cover letter and maybe also in their resume, but essentially you'll have more of a stage set before you get to that interview, and then suddenly just bring up video and basically the person's like, oh wait, actually no, I don't have any experience in that. Or maybe they do and they just didn't know that you were looking for it, and so they never mentioned it before. Having that clarity in your job description will also mean that you attract the right people for the job. You're always going to end up with a few people who kind of like toss their hat in there anyway, but it'll mean that you attract the people who already have that kind of experience rather than someone having lots of video experience, but then you don't really mention it and that's what they want to do all day, so they don't apply for the job. It's just setting yourself up so that you get the right people in and then you can decide whether you want to interview them or not. With a contractor, you're almost doing the opposite. You go to their website or you search them out and then look at what they have to offer. With a job description, you're kind of saying, this is what I want, come find me. So customize it to your will. Finding the right person is a combination of every factor I've spoken about. So there's a lot, but there's also a lot of things to use as a filter so you have less viable options to pick from. Rachel pointed out that it's all about personality. You are going to have a relationship with this person, hopefully for years, so you better like them. Part of this is talking with them, whether that's a formal interview or you going through their discovery and sales process to make a decision. You also have the option of using personality quizzes, testing tools, and walking them through some scenarios to learn even more about them and how they work. After you've made this decision, you'll need to put everything in writing for formality's sake. In some instances, you'll use their contract. Other times, you'll need to write your own. And in those situations, my inclination is to at least buy a template from a lawyer, if not work with one to write one for you. I sort of assume that everything should go in the contract, so everything is clearly stated and signed by both parties. If it's not in writing, it almost doesn't exist. Who you use and part of how you choose is completely up to you. The timing is also in your control somewhat because these people have their own lives and moving parts that fill their calendar. A lot of it comes back to knowing what you want and making a decision based on what you want to achieve. In the next episode, I'll be diving into managing your hires to maximize everyone's output and making the most of working with the people you've chosen to collaborate with. In the meantime, check out the workbook and work your way through this process. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital Hive podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend or on Instagram and tag me at Honeypot Digital. To find out more about Honeypot Digital and the work I do, or to find more episodes of the podcast and handy tips for small businesses marketing online, head to honeypotdigital.com.